This first. Okay, so we're recording now. So welcome to the Philosophy Club. We're meeting tonight. We're going to talk about some interesting topics. Okay, so this was something that Fabio asked in the philosophy chat a while ago, but I think it's a very interesting question. Are people really free when they have to spend most of their time working for a living? So I guess the general question is, how free are we really in our society?
So yeah, obviously it depends on the definition of the word free, but I think we can somewhat um, have a consensus on that. Frank is like, I know Frank talks all the time about these things, like defining words like that, and
Uh,
I'll let Frank.
no. Please go. Please go.
Uh,
The longer I hold off on this, the better.
but yeah, I think we could work less than 40 hours a week. I don't know the full history of how the 40-hour work week got started, but I'm curious as to what you all think about that number. Is that the right number? Should it be less? What do you guys think?
Well, the
Wasn't it built
40-hour
around
work
Ford?
week got started by replacing a whole lot more hours. So I think it was basically the advent of unions and things like that that brought the work
That
week
was Gerald
down to
Ford.
40 hours.
Hold on.
Yeah, I think Craig is right. Actually, 40 hours at the time didn't seem like a lot because people were being forced to work very demanding shifts. You know, it was a lot more than 8 hours, I think. Like when they started having people work in factories, I think it was more like 14 hours or something like that. A day, obviously, not a week.
Well, and also in the past, uh, people worked a lot, like from sunup to sundown. In 1900, 70% of the people on Earth were farmers. And I don't know if you guys have ever been around anybody who farms for a living, but they work from sunup to sundown. And even then, it's not done. And but today, less than 2% of people work in agriculture.
Because the Industrial Revolution. Industrial Revolution. buddy.
And when they started working factories, it was also something very demanding. Like I said, because there were no protections for workers, so I think people were just forced to work 14, 16 hours a day, and that was basically capitalism in the 18th century, early 19th century. And I don't know when they enacted those protections for the first time, but I think it was early 20th century.
I do have it here that Henry Ford started the 40-hour work week. I just looked it up real quick to double check myself. But it was basically that he gave his workers Sunday off so they could go to church. That's what he did for his factory workers. At least it's the first document one. Yeah. But yeah.
I think one question though is when they worked that length of time, did they work that long because they really had to work that long in order to survive? Or was it kind of the power of the companies that they were working for kind of made them work that long or they would lose their job?
Those are both pretty much the same thing for people in those conditions. Right, we're talking around just pre and just post and post depression. So yeah, you took whatever you could to feed your family, and if it meant you worked 16 hours a day, 18 hours a day, you did it. Or you could be like my dad and work in the mine, right? They worked, in his family, they worked in the mines in northern Minnesota. And you think that agriculture was tough.
I guess one question I have is, were the companies paying the people equal to the market value or equal to the actual value of their labor, or were they paying them less than the value of their labor?
Well, it depends. Okay, labor value, that's Marxism, like ideology. But really, the value of their labor, what they were being paid at that time it was ridiculously low. The disparity was huge. The big redeeming part of it, though, was that they were able to have some income or economy instead of just agricultural areas, so they could purchase property and build their means over time. That was the big redeeming factor of it. But yeah, there were instances of things known as what is it called, penny stocks in London, where you would literally pay a penny to be tied to a wall, and you would sleep there at night. This happened during the Industrial Revolution in London, so it was pretty extreme. Probably the most extreme disparities our nation or the world has in many cases seen, but mainly because those people were actually being considered in many ways as people with capital or economic standing before they weren't even recognized as it at all. So
and really, what kind of really started putting an end to all this stuff was World War II, right? Where all the men went to war, the women were the ones who were working 16 hours in the factories. But when the guys came back, they created something called the GI Bill to educate them.
Sorry.
I'm going to put this on.
And it was the educational opportunities that really started to make a change.
That's better.
Your video podcast.
Why did people leave the farm to go to the factory?
Lots of reasons. I mean, there were a lot of incentives. Probably the best example, all of you know about, the Russian gulag and all that crap. But both in Russia and in America, it wasn't so forced in America, but there were a lot of incentives for agricultural workers to come and work in factories. Mainly because, well, when you're young, you grow up on a farm or something like that, you want to go to the city, you want to get out, you want to experience more. But the factories actually gave people a chance to go to these cities. They weren't tied to a farm or to the place that supplied their food sources or anything. They could travel. They could go to these areas.
Well, and plus there weren't as many jobs in agriculture.
Yes.
Those kind of started to go away in the 20th century.
They still are going. But yes. Agriculture is very much so the terminology we use for it today in economics is a traditional economy, which is it's very much based around your family, the people you're pretty much born into it, you're brought up in it, and that's kind of your way of life. The thing is, if you weren't born into it, if you weren't brought up in the farm, getting into the farming business was pretty much goddamn impossible for a lot of people who are getting started. So the factories or the areas were really another option or an easy out. So anybody else want to say something?
And again, it was also that World War II thing that helped again, right? Because it was in the factories that you
a
built
lot of this
planes and
happened.
the ships and the tanks.
A lot of this happened you have to remember the Industrial Revolution happened almost 100 years before World War II.
Before World War One, in fact, yeah.
We don't have to go back.
Hey, there he is.
Here, yep.
But
no, I've talked to people in Asia whose parents or grandparents are farmers, and then they went and worked in factories and sweatshops. I mean, the farming life is not. People like to romanticize it, but especially if you're like a farmer in Indonesia or in China in the
America
1960s, it was not a good life.
Yeah, I always laugh when I watch a Western or a movie that's set in the past, and you see a scene of a street, and there's no horse shit on the street. There was horse shit everywhere.
I fucking hate horses. Everyone I know is always like, "Oh, horses are so beautiful." I'm like, "No, they're not. They shit everywhere. What the hell are you talking about? They smell." I fucking hate them.
Well, and they probably feel the same about us too. So,
I don't know.
but Monty Python got this right. How do you know he's the king? Because he hasn't got shit all
Shit
over.
all over him.
So,
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh.
I was going to say about freedom. I think a lot of it too is, do you have sort of creative ownership over the work you do, or are you in sort of a position where you just have to follow the commands of someone else? I think I read some kind of article on like job satisfaction, and like people who have ownership over the work they do are obviously much more satisfied than where you just have to take orders, I guess.
That was the whole point of Marxism, right? But Michael, yeah, I think that's a really good point. Actually, two very good points, because you made a very good point before. Like the first thing, and I just want to, before we go into the taking ownership thing, just something we didn't touch on. Actually, I think it was Bertrand Russell. We read this short essay not so long ago, I think last year, and we discussed it. I don't know if you're familiar with it, Michael, but regardless of how the 40-hour week started, Bertrand Russell, and this was still early 20th century, I think, and Bertrand Russell wrote an essay. I don't remember the name of the essay right now. After I'm done saying this, I'll look it up. But basically, it's an essay in which he makes the argument that we don't need to work as much, because as our means of producing improve, as we become more the productivity increases, we actually don't need to work as much. We could reduce our hours and still produce the same and live in the same way. And this would make a lot more sense than people just keep working as much as they are now, and the profit basically going always to the factory workers, but no one actually, except maybe for the profit that the factory workers make, no one actually improves their condition of life, no matter how high our productivity goes, right? So he was making the argument, yeah, I mean, let's say it's 40 hours a week. I think when he wrote it, maybe it was a little bit more than that, but in any case, as the means of production improve, yeah, it makes a whole lot of sense that we don't actually need to work those 40-hour a week weeks, basically work weeks. We
Yeah,
could
of
work
course,
less.
sorry, Bruno. As much as I love Russell, he was, of course, an English lord. So he may have had a different outlook on things than, say, the more plebeian English citizen, British citizen would have had.
Yeah. Well, but he was making the point that, people don't need to be essentially, there's no point for society at large, right? We there's no point for people to be exploited continuously, because as a society, it would, what he's making the point that what would make the most sense is as we improve our productivity, our actually work hours should be decreased, and people should have more time to do the things that they actually like to do in life. And this would,
Yeah,
even
and
he goes on to say
that's
that
interesting, but
he goes on to say
the
that this
British
would be,
Empire,
he goes on to say that this would actually be good for society if people do what they want to do.
yeah, what was the British Empire doing in India and China and the Africa and the rest of Asia at that time? Again, I think his outlook is somewhat skewed in this regard. And again, I'm a big fan.
Bruno.
So that's
Welcome,
one of
Ruben.
the arguments behind UBI. Is that
Yeah, exactly, Sashir. So this is Russell is like the I guess the early adopter of those kinds of ideas.
It should also be said that eventually he did meet Lenin, and he spoke of him, said, I did not much care for the man, and he actually wound up changing his views to another area. That is actually documented. So,
I'm sorry.
also on the grounds,
Can you repeat that, Frank? I didn't quite. What do you?
Russell eventually did meet Lenin. It's actually recorded, and you can hear it.
Oh, Lenin.
And yes, Vladimir Ilyich Lenin. So he did eventually meet and spoke to him, and as what he said to the man, what he said back to him, he said, I didn't much care for the man. And he did actually wind up changing his views later in his life. You can actually look it up on YouTube.
Okay.
I have. So also more to your point though, what that doesn't take, or what Marxism, this is one of the flaws that Vladimir Ilyich Lenin actually documented in one of his books, doesn't take into the account, is the rising demand, as our economics are built on a structure of supply and demand. And as the workers, our production usually increases, what we forget is often that our economic system is a globalized system in the way that we do things. And as more people want our product or want our stuff, it does not mean we get to back off and then give the extra time to the worker. Usually it means we now need to produce more because we are seen as a higher quality or somebody to be recognized. It's part
Yeah.
of craftsmanship
Oh,
that
I
we talk
I-
about when somebody's getting recognized for their craft. It
Yeah,
happens.
just so I understand, and this is I'm just asking a question.
Yeah.
Is the prevailing view that the increases in production are because people are working more?
I mean, I think that's almost okay. Increases in production are not just because people are working. What I'm saying is because there is a higher demand for certain things. As we usually, as companies, supply their product, consumers become familiar with their product, and as their name and their quality grows and people find out about it, more and more people want that product, and the demand starts to grow. So you need a greater supply to meet the greater demand. If you don't, then you're not maximizing your profits. So usually what winds up happening is they go, shit, we have more consumers now, more people we need to meet. We need to work people more time, or have our workers do overtime, hire more people.
So
they don't hire more people.
did
Work overtime.
changes in technology have anything to do with
yes.
increases in production?
Yes, of course.
I'll say that's the big reason why we have more product is productivity. It's what Russell said. Productivity is going to increase. It has already increased a lot, so it's going to continue as technology evolves. It's only natural that productivity increases. And actually, pretty soon, I'm sure we're going to have robots that can do all the work. So, what Russell was talking about nowadays, I mean, we can just look at the next 20, 30 years. We can basically, if we wanted to as a society, we could, delegate pretty much all of the manual labor to robots. I mean, it would be totally feasible. In fact,
Well,
that
and
is
not just the manual labor, because I mean,
exactly.
if you think about it, what's easier for a computer to do?
It isn't the manual labor.
Figure out the risks of loaning somebody some money or backing up a truck.
It's by far figuring out the risks of loaning somebody some money.
Yeah,
that's
so
the thing.
now
People
I think backing up a truck is a lot harder.
Yes,
for a computer
it is.
To do.
I can tell you it is harder.
Yeah.
And welcome, Rupinder, before I forget. So welcome. We're talking about, so the question, Rupinder, is, are people really free when they have to spend most of their time working for a living? So we're just talking about how free are people in our society, right? So how free are we really in our lives? So that's kind of this is our first question of the day. And yeah, what do you think, Rupinder?
I was just listening to you guys. I think there are two spectrums here. One could be like, you could look into like a product like iPhone, right? Where you could have automation built in terms of stamping, in terms of screwing, in terms of placing the right components at the right places, and in terms of all that automatic mechanization, which brings in a lot of productivity and efficiency from a technology standpoint. And you could have a bunch of workers. You can hire a bunch of workers to do a lot of things, but then that would be like a 9-to-5 job. You're good in forecasting your demand, so you can plan for that demand and not not bank upon like, oh my gosh, it's the last month and I have not to make 100 million iPhones. I mean, these things are like planned like 8-9 months in advance, so that you don't have to go through like more hiring or more overtime here. But then there's the other spectrum, which is, okay, are people truly free like while they're working? Well, if you're looking at a not skilled worker, somebody who's working a minimum wage, is a McDonald's employee or a Jiffy Lube employee. I mean, those people typically have to do not just one job, maybe 2 or 3 different jobs to make ends meet. They may have rent to pay, they may have kids to school, they have food and maybe wine, I don't know, um, but I don't think like they are free in it, so the question that becomes is like, how do you make that happen? Like, how do you create or incentivize the system where people can like upgrade their skills or not? I just don't know. Like, I think there's always going to be like that strata of work where you will always have those kind of people like who will be McDonald's employees, and you probably need those type of workers too. But I don't think like those workers are relatively like living a very free life. I don't think they will ever be free.
Yeah,
I think we need to define freedom here. I mean, I was just
Yeah.
thinking about.
Yeah, I think mixing up freedom with the fact that some people have to work, I'm not getting the connection there.
Yeah, it's a.
Well,
But
like, I mean, like,
no, I get it. I get it.
well,
If I was
okay.
to-
So we can try to define freedom, but I think that the point of the question when asked, I think that we're not talking about freedom as in, yeah, you're not a slave. Like, people can't really people don't own you, so you are free, obviously. So that I don't think we're asking about that essential freedom, but we are talking about the freedom to basically choose what to do with your life and what to do with your time, right? So that, I think it's freedom in that sense. I don't know if that's clear now or not, or if you still think that we
Okay.
can talk about freedom in that context. I'm not sure.
Freedom to choose what you do in your life.
Yeah, look, so I don't
I
know.
don't know if I
Well,
agree
I
with
don't
that
think it makes
definition.
sense that
well, no. I mean,
which is
if
fine.
that's
Which
what
is
you want to
fine.
go with your definition, but I would also say no, it's fine. If
Sorry.
you're kind of no, I'm sorry. I was
Go
gonna
ahead.
say just you're kind of out. I can't catch you.
I mean, you could look at it a couple of ways. I mean, one, you could argue if someone who has a lot of money, who options are from dividends, doesn't really themselves, but they can do. They've got a lot of free time. They can do a lot of stuff with that money. But at the same time, you can argue that take the Thoreau angle, where he argued he was much more freer basically by not having a lot of stuff. He basically went and built his own shack and just did a little bit of farming, just enough to meet his basic needs, and then he spent the rest of his time just around and writing. I mean, he would argue he was free.
I think I'll argue that like a farmer, the basic precept of what you just outlined is definitely more free. Land, a little bit of resources, he can produce his own food, he's self-sufficient. But I'm just talking about like the normal Joe employee, man. I don't think like you can quantify them as free. Like he's just barely making it so that he can breathe.
Okay.
And I don't think like there's time in his life where he can dabble into what a free person would normally do without those encumbrances.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think freedom is really a state of mind, not. I think, I don't know if you guys have ever seen the movie Shawshank Redemption. How many of you have seen that?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, where the whole idea is he's in prison, but he feels free because he has all his friends there and he has his mind. I think freedom is very connected to sort of creativity and imagination in a way. It's more of a
Victor
mental
Frankl.
state.
Shawshank Redemption, he was in jail. He didn't have to worry about food, water, living, rent, anything.
And also, to be honest,
Other than like being incarcerated.
and who felt free? I'm not sure if we watched the same movie. Who felt free in that movie, Michael?
Oh, Red, Andy, like they were friends. They would play chess. They had like posters. They would just talk to. They would, yeah, like or when they played the record in the movie. Do you remember that scene?
Yeah, I mean, fair enough, but the whole like plot of the movie is that he spends the whole movie trying to get out of jail. So
It's
I
true.
don't know. I don't know. You know.
What about
But then the old guy who leaves. The old guy that left
Yeah,
jail.
The
He
old
committed
guy.
suicide.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. Can you tell
The
people?
whole idea is he was more free in jail than outside of jail because in jail he had all of his friends. He was like the librarian, so it was like when
Was
he
he
was in.
free or was he happy?
Yeah, actually, no, Frank, you're right.
Yeah.
Maybe free is not the right word there, but I don't know. I read on a review of the movie that the moral is supposed to be that you could be free even in jail. But yeah.
Oh yes, it's very, very,
You
very
guys
classic
remember that book
stoic
like somebody wrote like
take
years
on it.
back about living a life on a minimum wage, where this person actually is very well qualified person, but they chose to like live a minimum wage life.
Mhm.
So they were working like 3 different jobs, and she was trying to live a life just based upon the earnings she was getting. And I forget the name of the book. It was very short. It was a very short book, but it was very interesting. I'll it'll come to me. I'll share that with you later.
So
So-
it seems to me a lot of what you guys are trying to define as analogous to freedom is the ability to do what you want or to be in a place where you can actually follow your ideals or opportunities to your end, where you're not just simply a cog or a consequence of the system that you
I think
inhabit.
that would be very fair. Yeah.
And I guess in that regard, I do agree quite a bit. That's a very good way to start thinking of it. The only thing I would go is anybody free in our system or anything. I'd say, well, anyone as they're observed, I would say is necessarily of consequence. So by our definition here, not quite free. To give you some example, as we observe someone, we apply categories or we understand what that person is or what they do for a living or something like that. And when we do that, there is a causal relation that we're building to understand that thing. I don't know if I'm making any sense right now. I may be getting too abstract. Am I getting too abstract?
I think so.
Tiny bit.
Okay.
I tried to follow you, but I was not able to.
I have some
But
good
you wouldn't be frank if you didn't do that. So it's okay.
Well, I gotta check. I see everyone zoning out. Like, oh no.
Yes.
I think you're talking about that we could act with agency.
I think you're
Yes.
free to be yourself.
Decisions can act from our own agency and not from we're not being driven necessarily externally by
Well,
needs or components.
Yes, that is getting at it. Very much so.
You can go to Varanasi and be in like a cave and spend 3 years and become totally like reach into the depths of your consciousness and be and be completely free with absolutely no productivity.
Well, that's the thing. I could go out and live in the woods, and I have done it for long periods of time. The only thing is, eventually, when I'm out there, also my stomach will rumble. I'm like, oh shit! Now I got to get food. Fuck! I didn't want to do this. Or it'll start raining. I'm like, I'm cold. I got to build a lean-to. What is this shit? But at that point, are we looking at that and saying those things are infringing upon my freedom, or are we just looking at that and saying that's a necessary component you have to deal with to survive? Because I feel like this is analogous to when we talk about jobs.
it just means that like you have not like really gone deep into your conscious awareness where food becomes irrelevant.
Food's always irrelevant.
So I
Uh,
wonder,
Kidding, Frank.
can someone give me an example of somebody who is free by whatever definition
Well, yes,
we think is
something
applicable?
something very simple. So the contrast here is between a person who works, like Rupinder said, two jobs, and has a real trouble paying just basic bills, or let's just say even one job, just for the sake of it. Okay, that person, has to work this one job to pay his bills every month. If he doesn't go to work, I mean, he can't pay his rent or whatever, so it's a very paycheck to paycheck existence, and he really doesn't have much of an option, of doing something else, just for the sake of the argument. So he's really just stuck in this, what a lot of people call a rat race. So this guy's just stuck in this rat race, this routine, and this is kind of, and most of his time is really just spent working this job that he doesn't care about. Let's say, McDonald's, right? So this is one option A, right? And the contrast is option B. Let's say this guy, he made a bunch of money because he invested in Tesla stocks, like Ethan, and now he has a lot of money. So he doesn't really need to worry about paying his bills. He can go do his philosophy club, and he can go have archery classes, play chess in the park. And he's just trying to figure out what he wants to do with his life. And he's basically, whatever it is that he's interested in doing, he can do that, as well as having some sort of employment if he wants. So he
So
has
what
choices, right? He has options.
saying here then
That's the contrast.
is being rich is being free, because that seems to be the equation that I'm hearing here.
It doesn't need to, not every time, but I mean, yes, being rich gives you a certain amount of freedom. Yes, I mean, it's not
So
the
you
only
see-
way to be free, but certainly, yeah. I mean,
You see
and-
rich as a
and if you-
sufficient
if-
condition, but not a necessary condition.
And if you get rich because a lot of other people don't in the meantime, that's okay then. Because that's often how one gets rich, is one gets rich because a lot of other people are doing stuff and not getting rich. And where's that money coming from?
Well, that
Except-
may, or as we observed history, that seems to be true a lot, but that's not necessarily true. I mean, both of these are sufficient.
okay,
Being
yeah,
rich is
I mean,
a sufficient condition. That may be true, but it's not always necessarily true.
yeah,
Ergo,
true,
it may
Frank.
be sufficient. So,
Yeah, I agree with Frank, but I guess if that's giving you trouble, Craig, let's just say, for the sake of argument, this guy just won the lottery, right? So that gave him a lot of freedom. So
still rich.
I'm basically coming up with these examples because, you can contrast both, right? Or let's even say it's the same guy, for 20 years, he goes to this job, he does this thing, he just pays his bills, he never has money in the bank, and he's stuck in this routine, and then he wins the lottery, and then he leads a different existence. It's not about luxury or anything, but he just has
Okay,
the time to do some things that he always wanted to do. So
so
that's what we're talking about, right?
I win
that's
the
different.
lottery and I'm free now. What about the 1.5 million or whatever it is people who went and bought lottery tickets and spent money that maybe they shouldn't have on lottery tickets? What about those people that didn't
Well,
win?
but you're turning this into a moral question, which is an interesting question, but that's not really like the question that. So I'm just giving you an example, right, of two different situations. So I guess, yeah, if we're going back to the original question, we can also talk about the morality of, some people being rich and some people being poor. But really,
And
I
well,
mean,
can we have real freedom without morality?
Freedom.
I
Are
don't know.
they really
Different thing.
separate animals?
Yeah.
Go
You're talking
on
about you're talking about liberty, not freedom.
Oh dear God.
Same thing, man. Those are the same thing.
So like like you could just cling on that.
True Scotsman fallacies.
Just going on the other side.
It
You can
depends on
find a
how
homeless guy. You can find a
defi-
homeless guy, and you could have a conversation with them, and you can find examples of a lot of people I see in India, who are like sages or wanderers and have no sense of attachment to anything. But fuck, they're happy. They're free.
Right. That's the Buddhist
So
view.
that's like one other extreme, they may not be very productive members of the society, but they're definitely free.
Yeah, if I could place a question to Craig, that's what Rupinder is talking about as a Buddhist or a Vedic view of essentially freedom is about non-attachment. Yeah, you could argue,
I
well,
like that definition.
except if a monk is free because he has no sense of attachment, and ultimately that's the goal of enlightenment. What about all those people who have not reached that? I mean, what is
You
attachment?
do what you can to help them.
you're not attached to them.
But see, that's the Mahayana view of the compassionate, that basically you can't attain your enlightenment until everybody else does. The Theravadan view or the Vedic view would basically say, well, it doesn't matter. That's, in fact, worrying about them would be an attachment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Well,
I
then you're
wanted to
pretty much
say,
screwed no matter what. So.
I think freedom is a state of mind. However, certain circumstances in your life can make it harder to have a free state of mind, in my opinion. So it's like, let's say you're forced to, I don't know, shelve boxes in a warehouse for 16 hours a day.
Yeah.
It's very hard to have a
Conveyor.
free state of mind. Although I suppose you could hypothetically imagine someone that spends 16 hours shelving those boxes, but in their mind, maybe they're generating music or they're thinking of new philosophical ideas, and then they would be free, in my opinion. So it's
I
not.
don't think Frank is doing much imagining here.
Oh, not at all.
It's not the.
That's
It's
Frank's
not.
life.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we should separate. I think it's really a psychological state, is what I'm saying. What do you guys think about that?
Michael, I like what you say about freedom as a state of mind, and
Yeah.
and what that brings to my mind is, do you guys know who Viktor Frankl was?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Okay,
I read his.
I
read the
would
book.
hardly say he was free, but he considered himself free. He retreated into an area in his mind that the Nazis couldn't get to,
Mm-hmm.
and that was where he found freedom, in my view.
That's also the message of Shawshank Redemption. That was his idea, is that
It's
we've retreated
it's
here.
it's a play on the old Stoic tale of a prisoner who can live in a prison cell and be free because though they can leash my body, they can never leash my what they would say soul, my eternal soul or spirit. We could call it mind if you want to.
So the state
Although,
of mind is manifesting an alternate state of reality then.
yeah, sort of, kind of. It depends on who translates it.
Is it really
Just so
freedom,
I
though?
understand, is the prevailing sentiment here that if you have a job or you earn money or you have a lot of money, that you can't be free?
I don't have that sentiment. No.
I would probably argue that if you're a human being, you're probably not free. But I don't know. I mean, I'm really partial to the Chris Christopherson definition of freedom that I pasted into the chat there, which I think would probably be applicable both to Frankl and to the Shawshank Redemption.
I think the only way to soundly solve for freedom is something you guys were actually doing a bit, is you pose a quantity or value to it. You're more or less free. And you do it in comparison to, where you were before, where you were after. I'm freer than I was. I'm less free than I was in this area. And what you're really saying, freedom in this case, is I'm less of consequence. I'm less the cog, kind of what you guys were talking about, the worker or something like that. I'm more of something of my own being and will, agency, that I can do in this area, and less kind of just, following the routine or being forced to do something. Because I don't think when we get to freedom and somebody, says a childish, explanation, freedom is I can do whatever I want. Who the fuck lives like that? No one lives like that, at least no one I know. I mean, usually they go, okay, whatever I want within reason. What is within reason?
I know a few people who live like that, and I hate them.
Oh, I would hate them too.
I was just reading your definition, Craig. Freedom is just not another word for nothing left to lose. I'm just glad that that was not the prevalent thing during the Cold War.
Sorry.
Because if that was during the Cold War, we would all be dead, man.
Yeah.
Well, I love that you just quoted Facebook Fight Club, Ethan. It's only after you've lost everything that you're free to do anything, which is a great quote. I mean, that's the best movie ever for quotes.
Right, but Fight Club's argument was an anti-materialistic argument too.
Exactly.
I mean, Fight Club and Thoreau were actually very similar.
Yeah, and Fight Club, actually, he is making the point that you are not free, and that's, I mean, personally, I think it's absolutely right. I mean, I don't want to lecture anyone.
Argument.
Yeah, I don't think we're free. I think we are freer than slaves. So
that's always the thing, though. We're freer than something else. We're comparing it to something else to give it context. That's fine, by the way. That's how you.
No, I agree. It's very hard to talk in absolutes. So yeah, we are freer than slaves. We are freer than the prisoner in Shawshank Redemption. We are freer than the prisoner in the concentration camp. But I think we should.
What about
humans should aspire to a little bit more than that, right?
Sure.
Well, that's my opinion.
What about the past? Like, I've heard that hunters, like hunter-gatherers, they had a lot more free time.
Exactly. So Harari makes that point as well as Tyler Durden in Fight Club, which is that he makes that point that hunter-gatherers didn't have to what does he say, Ethan? Work all the time to buy shit they don't need, So that basically describes society. We work a lot to buy shit we don't need. And also we work.
That's the thing, though. We were just talking about, though. I'm sorry.
Unfortunately. So,
but the Tyler Durden argument again is similar to the Thoreau argument. It's this idea that essentially our labor to purchase stuff because of expectations of society is essentially enslaves us, and the idea behind slavery is that our labor does not go to it's not to our own benefit. It's not of our own choosing.
Yeah.
At that point.
Well,
so essentially the pursuit of consumerism becomes slavery by another method.
And I told myself that coming back after going to get a beer, that I would just listen for a while to make sure I understood where things were. But I would hardly equate doing work for money, like going to the office and working in the cube. I would hardly equate that with slavery. In fact, I would avoid that word because it's not slavery.
Well, there are different types of slavery, though. I mean, I absolutely agree with you, but I think you can say I'm a slave to something. You don't mean that you're an actual slave, like a slave in a plantation, right? That's we're talking about.
I know that that's not what's meant, but
no, not at all.
It's like I studied martial arts for a little while, and I was a little taken aback because many of the students referred to the teacher as master, and master has a connotation, associated with slavery and everything, and I found that set off as something in me and found it offensive. But I later learned it's not that the teacher was the master of the students; he was the master of the discipline.
Yeah, right.
And so that has a different connotation to me now.
Well, just
but slavery does not.
if you're a slave to someone, you know, then we're talking about slavery, like the slavery you're talking about. But you can be slavery to a thing, you know. You can be slavery to a dynamic. You can be a slave to a necessity. And I mean, we can use a different word, you know.
Yeah,
but,
if
but
slavery is
basically,
offensive or it has a negative connotation or rhetorical effect, we can always substitute with a
right,
synonymous word like
exactly,
dependent to
right. If it
forego those
Yeah.
areas.
if it bothers you, we can use a different word. I mean, but that's not the intent.
Rhetorical
No, no,
effect,
no.
it matters.
I'm
It's
telling you
fine.
what I think. I'm not telling you what you should think.
No. It does matter what you feel. The emotion matters just as much as the rational.
But so
Maybe
the
not as much in my place, but still matters.
but I guess the word slavery, so the reason why it's so, yeah, I don't even know what a replacement would be, but basically the idea that, so when you're a slavery to
Dependent,
someone,
bondage.
slave to a dominatrix. Wow, we're getting deep here.
Hey, but you could be free.
No, like the lordship and bondage argument from Hegel. Come on, man. Get your mind out of the gutter.
What's
Jeez.
the safe word?
No, I'm just reading the
Banana.
comments here, so we're getting some interesting.
Pain shall make me free.
But the slave is you know, it's the absence of freedom, right? That's the, and quite literally that.
Is it?
Well, yes. I mean, in ancient
Is
times.
it? Does it literally have the definition that
No,
slavery
no.
is not freedom? There's a negation in there. Are
Well,
you going
no,
to give me that?
well,
Because
what I mean.
otherwise, you're manufacturing a false dichotomy, sir.
No, I don't think I
Check
am.
yourself.
Calm down, Frank. I think a slave.
I will not.
I will not.
Don't calm down, Frank. Never calm down, man.
Slavery is based on
I
the
got
absence
Frank
of
riled
agency.
up. I'm getting a lot of people riled up, man.
I mean, if we talk about freedom as
I'm
being
fine.
agency, yeah, slavery would be the absence of agency, ability to act without
I think,
agency.
That's
I
where
think
I was going, Sashir.
I think there's a correlation between the physical act and the mental state, but I still think we have to separate the two. So, like, if you were a slave picking cotton back in the day, that makes it much harder to have a free mental state. So it's strongly correlated. Or also, if you're living in a prison, it's a lot harder to have a
Yes.
free mental state. But they're not the same thing, and I think we should separate the two.
So it's
I
a
think-
spectrum.
I
The
think
difference
we would
between
say we
slave
would
picking
see
cotton
someone.
versus the 9 to 5, $10 per hour person cotton, you know.
We would see people in these situations and we would say it's more likely that they're not free, or we feel like we would get what we're doing is abductive reason. We're saying off of the incomplete data, this is the most likely scenario I can come to that they're not free because of this area. So that's not to say that they're necessarily not free. They could be. We're just going off what's most likely. So
Exactly. Yeah.
it's not negation.
Well, and I think there's a difference between political freedom and personal freedom. You know, the free thinking, free thought, and you know, thankfully, we can have this conversation, and we don't have to be in a secret room or an attic.
Yes.
somewhere.
Yeah, that's another type of freedom, which is political freedom. Fortunately, we all enjoy that. Not everybody in the world does.
So there's a little bit of an aspect of life I would love to describe. So coming from like Punjab in India, it's like a land of farmers, you know. So if you go back, you know, the 1940s, 50s, 60s, 70s in India, this farmer, his lifestyle was pretty much in a year he's going to work about 3 to 4 months. Planting crops and harvesting crops were like his major work efforts. The remaining 7, 8 months, it was like, man, weddings, festivals, natural bonhomie. Yeah, you know, like there are multiple festivals in India. So So that was his 12-month cycle, and he was a happy man. But if like the monsoon didn't come, yeah, he would get screwed.
Well, the
So
life Harari in his book *Sapiens*. I mean, Harari describes the life of the hunter gatherer, and I mean the hunt. It's not that it's an ideal life, right? Let's not romanticize things. Like hunter gatherers had real problems. I mean, a hunter gatherer didn't really live until very late in life.
I would say.
well, the hunter-gatherer is only working for himself. A
Exactly. But
farmer is like producing food for millions of people.
exactly.
So it's a
So
very productive life. If you're working like 4 months and you're free for the remaining 8 months,
yeah, but
I think it's
the
good.
hunter
But-
gatherer. It's true
But that
he was
wasn't
working for
even
himself.
true of farming for most of human
Yeah.
history. For most of human history, people farmed mostly for themselves.
That's the thing. That was what you weren't here, Rupender. We were talking about the effects of the Industrial Revolution and basically, the transition from a traditional economy to a market / command and mixed economy. But I don't know. The thing is, hunter-gatherers did live in communities and they did work for each other. There was
There was definitely a community. Nobody actually worked for himself or
well,
herself.
no, there were lone wolves too.
Well,
Both of
yeah,
these
but those are
existed.
definitely the exceptions. I mean,
Now that's an exceptional data. Never mind.
I mean,
Anywho,
most hunter gatherers lived in tribes, right? So, but and they lived in a way that they did not have the constraints that we have, in modern society of having to work for somebody else, going to an office 8 hours a day. I mean, that was not the lifestyle of people for hundreds of thousands of years. So it's not like what we have now is necessarily the way humans should live or the way humans are optimized to live.
Well, they
Yeah.
had they had constraints. They had very different constraints. If you're a hunter-gatherer, I think Harari brings this up. You're very dependent upon the natural environment. You essentially, hunter-gatherer societies are more ecologically conscious because they have to be. There's no other option. If you overhunt your niche, you're going to starve
Or move.
or move at that point. But then if you overhunt the next niche, it's going to be a difficult situation. I mean, you're very limited in terms of how you can organize your society.
Also, I think a lot of people nowadays you can live very bare bones. Like you can split an apartment with like 10 other people. You can get everything from the dollar store, just eat beans and rice. It's possible to live on very little. So you could work 1 year and then use that money to just get by for another 5 years a lot of times if you're really, really stingy. I don't think people do that because they don't like the social element that would come from it. It's sort of like you'd go down in social status in a way. And so I feel like that sort of social pressure is part of the reason why maybe we work more than we need to.
Right. Well, that's exactly what Thoreau did. I mean, he took off for a year and just lived in a shack on Walden Pond.
oh,
Yeah.
he
What
went
the
to the
Unabomber
city
did
all
that
the
for several
goddamn
years, too.
time.
And you have to,
That far.
I mean, you have to look at the trade-off. I mean, he made a trade-off, right? It's not like there was no downside to it, like as far as like, it puts, like when you live all by yourself, you're isolated from all the other people that you usually talk to. So I feel like, I don't know if he's totally honest if he says it didn't have like any psychological effect on him, like living in isolation so much. But yeah.
How you guys
Thoreau
doing?
wasn't
with
isolated.
isolation?
He was
Yeah, he
just
was.
outside of Lexington. He still talked to people.
Yeah, he actually documented in the book Walden when he talked to an Irish family, because people all around the fucking country live like that all the time, not just spoiled little rich kids who didn't pay taxes. And
so yeah, maybe maybe there's this sort of social pressure to sort of have more than we really need, and it's just, yeah, cause issues.
What was the population density then versus what the population density is now? I wonder.
Oh, it wasn't even close.
I figure.
Actually, in the area around Walden, it probably wasn't much different.
You think so?
In the area around Walden, I've been there. Yeah,
Let's see.
it's suburban Boston now. It's
Yep.
it's probably somewhat denser, but remember, New England had already been settled for hundreds of years by the time you were at Walden.
We shall solve this with our master Google.
Yeah, you can't say, yeah, the population of the U.S. was much less. I'm just talking.
No, I'm
specifically
talking
around
about, I'm
Walden.
looking for Walden. Like, Google knows all. Okay.
Except how to properly treat its employees. Yeah.
Well, you can't ask too much of it.
Yeah, I know. After all, then they might think they were free or some silly thing like that.
So it seems that most of you guys don't think there is a deficit of freedom, so to speak, in society.
I do.
mean, I think.
I'm sorry, go on, Frank.
I'm sorry. It's not that I think there's a deficit in society. I just don't think there's a deficit or a surplus. I don't think there's either. When we look at it from a social area, or we say, are more or less people free? I look and I go, how the fuck am I supposed to figure this out? How am I supposed to find out more or less people are free? And usually people will do it by what they see as inherently corollary data points. They'll say, well, if they have more money, then they're free. Or if they have more property, then they're free. Or they'll use all these things. And I'll look and go, well, those aren't necessarily feeding into freedom on all cases. That's just something you're saying is more likely to feed to freedom. And the point I'm making is I think freedom as it's applied en masse, that I can have immediacy and deal with the person that I'm asking who's free, I can never clearly define or give you an actual answer, like yes or no, if they're more or less free. So, Craig, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, you're fine. I'm interested to hear what you have to say. I have another use case that I'm going to run past the group, though. The mask wearer versus anti-mask wearer thing. Right, the anti-mask wearers say, hey, telling us that we need to wear masks is impinging on our freedom.
Yep.
So what do we think about that?
I think it's like, how do you take a data point and then define two or multiple sets of realities around it? That's what it is.
Yeah, I would say by definition,
Because-
wearing a
because-
mask is impinging on our freedom. That is a correct statement. However, it is a good, it is good to impinge on our freedom in that situation. So,
That's your viewpoint. But what I'm saying is that
Yeah.
if you already have a predisposed bias or a viewpoint, you can twist the data towards that. There's always going to be a data to support any fucking viewpoint you have, man.
Well, yeah, of course.
And that's exactly what is happening. So until unless you find some scientific basis of what is truth about that data, okay?
Oh, but here's my metaphor here then is letting my freedom be impinged upon by requiring me to wear a mask better than letting my freedom be impinged upon by having me work a job where I pay taxes, where I can fund the doctors who are developing my vaccines and things like that.
I don't know.
The government is
Is
just
it better
printing a lot
then?
of money, so they don't need your tax dollars for that.
Well, I think research doctors, I think you will find most of them are not that necessarily fit that stereotype.
I feel like we're digressing here, and I feel like more so this just comes back to something we were talking about the founding fathers last time, and this really just comes back to me on the First Amendment, which I actually think is a consequence of the treaty of tolerance. It is really well founded, which is you can express your freedom so long as it doesn't encroach upon the freedoms of others. And I feel not wearing a mask that could potentially spread disease, or making choices or expressing your freedoms that could visibly endanger other people's freedoms or abilities to express themselves is sufficient in this case.
I think that's a very valid point, Frank. But like, I think like the anti-maskers will counter that by saying that like there is no scientific basis for you to wear a mask because it doesn't do anything.
That's the thing. And then I will counter back, okay, what would be sufficient scientific basis for you to believe in this area? So you show me you're not arguing in bad faith.
That's just being misinformed in any case.
And then you'll go back and forth, and that struggle will continue.
No, that would be the end of it right there.
Yeah,
And
but
If they could not show me a sufficient, that would be the end of it.
Yeah, for me, that would be enough to tell those people, stay the hell away from me.
but it's just
Right.
silly. I mean, it's just
Freedom is
silly,
not
you know, because
absence of responsibility. That's pretty clear.
No.
I mean, if we're talking the founding fathers and the basis of the Constitution, freedom is definitely not the absence of responsibility.
No, that was about the treaties of tolerance and the necessary conclusions they built off of Locke and Voltaire's, which is any liberal government where you have people, multiple viewpoints that are not to be encroached on by their beliefs, by the government. You have to have a sort of, constitution that will protect those people's beliefs and ability to have them without having everybody else encroach upon them. That was whole letters to England when Voltaire said why England was great was everyone had different views, but nobody attacked each other because no one knew where to go. No one knew who to attack or anything. They couldn't align with anything. That's what he thought was so great about it. I might be wondering.
You lost me.
Well, it's also in the second treatise, Locke is
Yes.
It's basically as simple as a matter of the commons and the air we breathe are very much the commons and how you treat the commons. I mean, we can act with freedom, but freedom still entails a responsibility of how we deal with commons.
Yeah, going back to what Bruno was talking about, but Bruno, you said, you asked about like a deficit of freedom. And do we think that we are freer or less free than we were in the past? My answer to that is I don't know, but I certainly don't think it's obvious that we are freer today than in the past. I think life is more convenient. I think we have better healthcare, better technology, but convenience and even less hours worked. Let's say we work 40 hours today and we used to work 80 hours before. Convenience and less hours worked does not equate to freedom, in my opinion, because freedom is a psychological state with my definition and not a literal meaning you're not forced to do something.
I think like you can like say it's a psychological state. It can be like individualistic. It can be community based. It can be state based. It can be country based. It can be based on the laws of the nation. There's so many like different facets. It mind boggles me like how I would struggle to define freedom. Like say for example, like if it was like if you were forced to drink water or bad air or breathe bad air, would you be free?
If I was forced
that is all driven by maybe pipelines, maybe fracking, maybe industrial pollution. In that sense, are you free? Probably not. You have to fight for the freedom, but it's a much more broader definition than like and I don't have the right answer to it, but I think there's so much multiple facets to it.
It's definitely.
If I may, I view things like freedom and morality similarly to how I view health. In other words, we all have ideas about what's good for our health, but nobody knows everything they need to know to have perfect health. But we do know that we shouldn't drink sulfuric acid, and we should eat a lot more fruits and vegetables. So it's a spectrum. Freedom is a spectrum. We may not be able to definitively describe the ideal state of freedom, but we do know some things. We know that freedom of speech is better than not having freedom of speech. We know that trial by jury is better than not having trial by jury. That's just how I view it.
Well, let's if you guys don't mind, let's move on. Let's do another question, and we'll get back to freedom some other day. I think there's a lot to talk. I think you're right.
yeah.
There, it's multifaceted. I mean, there are many different kinds of freedom. I mean, I think if you don't have economic freedom, I don't think you're really free. But we'll talk more about that on a later stage. But so let's talk about success now, unless someone has a different topic, which is also fine. So how can one define success in life? So how can we say that someone's successful or someone is not successful? Unless someone has a better topic, which I'm also open to talking about something else. But this is my idea. This is.
I think that success to me is like passion and love, man. That's it.
Eat.
I feel like that's such a broad.
You have sort of love, and you can, if you can make those two elements work, and the love can be like, many things.
Wait, it's love and
love for your child, love for your wife, love for your, like, there are many definitions, right? But like whatever works, whatever floats your boat. I think that makes you truly happy, and then I think like that to me would be very successful.
It's love, and what's the other thing?
Passion.
Nothing great was ever achieved without passion.
There you go, Frank.
So if you can love and be loved, and if you're passionate about things, then you're a successful person. Is that correct?
I think individually speaking, for myself, I think that would be sufficient. Yeah.
Okay. I think there's so many different.
Success, like there's always going to be like some economic freedom you would want, So maybe there are like some ancillary hooks to that love and passion to bolster that, because you need that. But yes.
Is success about money? Is money what defines success?
No.
Not for Rupinder.
Okay.
I think money plays an important role. What does it necessarily make you happy and successful? Fuck, I don't know. I don't think
it can be a sufficient condition, but it is not necessary.
Interesting. So is there something that is necessary?
I mean,
like money can buy travel, money can buy wine, and those are very important things here.
That I am successful in something, what would be necessary of me? What would I need to have to be successful in something? I think Rupinder already did it.
Really?
Not love. Love's, I don't care about that. Passion, yes, I do think that matters. So.
Well, if I could bring Rand into this, as I like to do every now and then.
We can bring
money is a measure of success, but it does matter how you get the money. And Rand would argue that if you get money through fulfilling your passion, that is the ultimate measure of success. Great. I mean, Howard Rourke at the end of Fountainhead was a successful architect, and he was well paid for it.
Well, I wouldn't say it's the ultimate. I'd just say money doesn't matter. The passion matters. Well, money matters.
But that's the point of Rand, though, because the villains in Rand are wealthy people who get money, but they get their money because they don't fulfill their passion. They betray their passion to get money.
Yeah.
I feel like success.
So success ends up being passion and money at the same time.
I feel like success is just a vague combination of everything that we want. More money, more friends, more status, more passion, love, more maybe even more relaxed, maybe more confident. Maybe I feel like the word success is it's, in my opinion, it's anything that we want. It's just so such a big umbrella.
That's a
Yeah.
pretty. I like that definition for success, because that's a hard very thing. I mean, the hardest thing to do with success is really to define it, right, in the first place.
Yeah.
The hardest thing is to achieve it, but the second hardest is to define it. Yeah, what is success? I think that's a good way to define it. You know, it's what people want.
Yeah.
I think to me, it's like success has to kind of like correlate with fulfillment, and that means very meaningful relationships. You know.
Hmm. And yeah, people want meaningful relationships. They're not satisfied with the superficial ones, at least not in the long term. So that would be a part of success, having good, meaningful relationships.
Actually, I think if I may, I think I can actually express this via mathematical, maybe academic for your guys' terms, which is the understanding of two concepts known as external and internal motivation. I've used these before. That are used when a mathematician is solving a problem. External motivation being when they solve a problem, usually the ends or the derivation of theorem, that's a conclusion, is already apparent. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to show the proof or show the way to get to the ends, making the map to get to the ends. Versus internal motivation, which is when they're just kind of running for it. They're kind of hitting the ground running, and they're almost just making it up as they're going. And when I talk about passion, what I see much, or Rupender, or some of you guys, if you're Watts, or when we talk about agency and freedom, I think this plays a role too. I see a spark of a person trying to express that person's self. And success or becoming of oneself to proud ends or of what they want, realizing what they want in this world seems to come from that internal motivation. I'm sorry if I got too abstract again.
No, I like it. I think internal motivation is very much about personal growth. So when you're if you're internally motivated to win a basketball game, it's because you know by winning that basketball game, you become more skilled as a player. You grew as a person. You personally changed.
Actually, I to be clear, I think actually I like what you're saying, but I like almost the philosopher Fichte put it beautifully, where he said goals that are self-defining seem to be infinite or internally motivated. Where you would say, I want to play basketball because I want to fucking play basketball. That simple area. Not because I want to be the best basketball player, not because I want to win, not because of any of these areas, because I like the activity in itself. At that point, there is
often I would say the activity in itself, you like it because it transforms you personally. Whereas if you like something, whereas external motivation means you're not really growing from doing the activity. You're not transforming as a person. You're just getting a thing like money or an object or something. That's kind of my view.
Oh boy, you guys have been posting a bunch in the chat.
Right, but that's where, if we can bring in, I mean, there's an existential argument too that success is measured by whether you have meaning, you can create it. I mean, it's like the story of Sisyphus is that yes, he's just pushing a rock up a hill that rolls down, but that gives him meaning.
Yeah.
In other words, each day he has success. Once he gets the rock up the hill, it rolls back down again. Next day he pushes it back up the hill. So in other words, every day he has a success versus the argument that maybe we don't have a success because we don't realize we have no sense of meaning or we have no sense of goal.
So even if you're losing, it changes you. Even if you play basketball and you lose, it improves your skills.
Exactly, yeah, because you learned from that loss and you grew as a player. Yeah.
Even if the rock rolls back down the hill, you still got it almost to the top.
So 2 questions regarding this. So if what you say is right, Michael, or it's appropriate to define success as in what people want. So what do people want other than passion? Like what are the things that people want that we can call successful? And second question, perhaps even more importantly, is success really internal or external? Does it
That's
matter?
another thing. I would say true success is actually not really what people want, but what actually makes people satisfied with their life. So I would say the real definition of success, it's not what people say they want, it's basically what they actually want, what actually makes them feel satisfied, fulfilled,
So
etc.
what do they actually want? And is it internal or external?
It is, that is internal, I would say, but I mean, like, that's a hard thing to get. We struggle with that, man.
I would say that is internal on the case by case, that what we envision, what we want, as we're talking about here, it seems to necessitate that we have the ability to want something, but the something doesn't necessarily have to be a material construct or something that is out there in the factual world. It could be something wholly conceptual, as in, I want to be a better basketball player. That isn't out there. Better basketball player isn't out there in the world. It's something that I get to, that I recognize after all those, all that work to play better basketball.
Except being a better basketball player is a tangible. I mean, since we were talking about martial arts earlier, well, the idea behind that is the perfection of the moment so you can win. I mean, there is a very tangible goal there of winning your match or winning your game.
Or just practicing it for funsies. That's what I do now. I mean, I'm not fighting.
My
So-
my general feeling on all this is, if you think your success is dependent on something external, you're never gonna get it. So
I think it has to be somewhat dependent. That's the thing. I think internal motivation, I think success is more about internal motivation, but I don't think you can exclude external at all, because someone who barely has enough food to eat or is constantly hungry or whatever, probably they would not feel satisfied. It would be, I feel like there at least has to be a little bit of external. Like you need some stuff.
I believe external plays a role too. It's just that, understand what I'm saying is, I'm saying it seems from what we've defined across all of us in all areas, what is necessary, what is or empirically necessary. So where's the consensus amongst us is that we seem that there has to be an internal part. Now, the external part, then, therefore, which I agree, could be sufficient. It could be an area that we say, it seems that this is very likely that it would be about or be connected to it.
Kind of
Well,
like
if
Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Yeah, we can go about Maslow too.
Yeah.
In many ways, people look at those and they go, "Oh, those are needs. They have nothing to do, shelter, warmth, food, water." We go about these very easily
Internet.
things. Of course. Damn it, man! We're in 2020. We couldn't even have this conversation.
well, if let me relate kind of something that one of my senseis told me, who was also a person who was studying to become a Buddhist monk, was regarding why Zen Buddhism is such a warrior philosophy and why it was basically so adopted by martial artists and by the samurai class. Zen Buddhism is ultimately about attachment. It's a very austere form of Buddhism.
Yes.
That does aim for non-attachment. So why would that, regarding being a warrior, why would a philosophy of non-attachment appeal to warriors? Because that's a very physical, materialistic aspect. You're literally trying to win. You're trying to defeat somebody to save your life for another goal. But the way he explained it to me was that this idea of Zen was a perfection of the moment. Was that you train so hard, you do so many things that you act, ultimately your actions become completely appropriate to the moment. And in terms of
pointing its way to the moon.
Yes, exactly. In terms of being in combat, though, or we don't engage in a martial arts match, is that if you are so well trained that you act without thought appropriate to the moment, what's appropriate to the moment is you win. And in other words, that what's holding back some of our views of success is that we question our motivation, so we don't act within which is appropriate to the moment. If we're so in tune with the moment, that just our action necessarily leads to victory. So in other words, this philosophy of non-attachment ends up applying very much to a real world situation. And this is martial arts explains it most, but if you talk to many good athletes, they'll basically say the same thing.
Yeah.
I mean, Barry Sanders talked about, well, how did you run so well? Well, it's just like jazz, I'm
Just make it up as you go.
right. Yeah. I'm just riffing on the moment.
Yeah.
Or, you ask baseball players, how do you hit it? A 95-mile-per-hour fastball? You see ball, you hit ball. It's basically you've trained yourself so well, you react. If you sit there constantly trying to think about, well, I got to hit this ball, you'll never do it.
Yeah,
You just
it's like
react.
learning how to drive a straight.
Travis. Oh God, I don't know enough about golf.
Yeah. Yeah, the swing. Yeah, the people telling golf, don't overthink your swing.
I don't know. And I know from you're talking Zen, I know a Taoist would look at that and say, yes, that's the way of an artist. That makes sense. An artist is for the moment or for that passionate expression that they can do regardless of skeptical thought. Neat.
Yeah, there is the Tao soldiers. There's the famous Tao story of the Tao of the butcher, who the butcher could carve up the animal before he even realizes it's dead.
Yep. I mean,
Anyway, my point was that there is, if we're talking about success, there is a lot of this stuff relates to there is an external measure of success, even though it's portrayed and discussed in terms of an internal measure. Zen is ultimately an internal philosophy, but yet it has a real practical application.
So, okay, so this raises the question, who decides if one is successful? Does that individual themselves make that decision, or does the society make that decision, or does history make that decision? Who makes that decision?
Well, let's use an example. Well, no. Let's use an example. Craig, you declare you're successful, okay? Say it. Feel good about yourself. Say, I'm successful.
I'm a lumberjack and I'm okay.
No, you have to say you're successful. Say it properly. Craig says, okay.
If I were any more of a smashing success, I probably wouldn't be here talking to you guys.
Okay. But
he's a successful lumberjack. Let's go with that.
There we go.
Craig says he's successful. I then will postulate, or give the proposition, Craig is not successful. I'll do a full-on negation. Mm-hmm. How do I then the responsibility would then fall back onto Craig to prove successful.
Oh, clearly
Craig.
You're a lion-ass son of a bitch.
But no. Here's the thing.
Frank, I think the burden of proof is on you.
No, it's actually on him. That's how propositional logic works.
No,
if I put on
the burden of proof is on the person who proposes.
I can grab my book right now and pull on our logic.
Okay, all right.
Your book is not successful, Frank.
Well, let's say the burden of proof is on both. I mean, how can we prove it either way? So because that's the interesting.
Okay, that's the interesting thing. As I prove a negation to my observation, and this has to do with evidence, how we prove things as they are observed. The thing is, I can never show evidence to show the non-existence of something. I can only cite the lack of evidence to prove its non-existence. That's how evidence works. I can't prove a negative. That's what the negative is on him. Anywho, so Craig would then
you have to do that very differently.
I know, but I'm right. Anywho, Craig would go on to the areas, and I usually am not dogmatic like this. It's only with logic, trust me. Craig would then go on to the areas where he would then be able to say he has to show evidence to me that of his successfulness, or convince me of his successfulness on this area. Now, the thing about evidence to Craig is what he might see that makes him successful may not be sufficient or the same as what I see as successful. So it's a categorization difference. So what's inevitably going to happen is I will eventually start going, oh, that's not really successful. Oh, that's not really successful. Oh, that's a no true
I
Scotsman
think what
fallacy.
Frank is saying is that he's making a category mistake.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's the essential. That's how you catch them.
I don't think any person decides whether or not you're successful. I think you're successful if you felt satisfied, fulfilled, etc. with either your life, with what you did, with your career, or whatever. So how would you determine that? You'd have to. I don't think any person could do that. You'd have to drill into how they
This-
actually
well,
feel, go into
This
their biology.
reminds me of a story that John Lennon told, and I don't think it was true. I think he heard it, and it has a certain amount of wisdom to it. But he said when he was 5 years old that his mother told him happiness was the key to life. And when he started school, the teacher asked, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" And he said, "Happy." And the teacher said, "I don't think you understood the question." And he said, "I don't think you understand life." And
That's just
so
linguistics, but I mean it's true. But yeah, I mean the problem is it's really hard to it's hard to find fulfillment. So
Is it?
that's true. I'm not saying that it isn't. I haven't said that at all.
I'm sitting here with my hams and I feel great.
Prove
Right,
it.
but this is partially the appeal of
Well,
why combat is
here's
measured.
hams. I'm sitting here and I'm great.
Right, but if we talk again, the warrior aspect is that in combat, if you live, you're successful. How do you know you're not successful? You're dead.
Yeah.
But again, this is sports descend from combat, so
Go
it
ahead.
is
If you're a
measure
samurai,
of you win. If you win, you're successful. If you lose, you're not.
if you're a samurai, though, if you die honorably, you still win.
Well, you have to die to fulfill a greater goal.
Yeah, it's just that you don't
Yeah,
know it.
The daimyo, yeah, the service to your lord.
If your daimyo loses,
Knows all
you've
about
lost.
You walk
yourself.
up to a dead samurai and you start poking him with a stick and you go, how do you feel? Are you doing great? Are you okay? How is it?
Well, but we all die, right?
Yeah.
So it's a matter of how.
So what
right?
did we settle on it? Is it more
Right,
important?
that was a very Spartan point of view. About the ultimate freedom is choosing how you die.
What was that, Bruno? I'm sorry.
So did we settle on it's more important to be internally successful or externally successful? Can someone
I think
be successful
it is
if
necessary to be.
if everybody considers him a loser? Someone can still be successful.
Yes. I think it is necessary, not more important. It's not a transitive value, more or less. I believe it is necessary, so directionality, that someone be internally motivated to be successful, and it is sufficient that they are externally motivated or that there is observance as external motivate. As we observe anything, it is sufficient by evidence as we prove it. That's me and Craig's little discussion there.
Now, if I understand Frank, in this particular case, I agree with it.
Mm-hmm.
But understanding Frank is I'm
yeah,
not
I know.
entirely certain of that.
Trust me, I know.
I think you need a balance of both, probably more of the internal than the external. But I think, and different people may have different balances, but I think probably more internal, but still some external.
Well, how much is that conditionally, though? I mean, again, comes back to categorization. I mean, Viktor Frankl, bringing him up again, did say he was successful because he wasn't defeated by the Nazis. By physical measures, yes, he was. He wasn't killed, but he was defeated. But he came back that the Nazis didn't defeat him in his mind.
Well, let's say I pose anything in a shifted scope to you. We talked about, me and Craig, when we were talking about, what if Craig said, it is my belief that I am successful. Okay. And then I tried the same negation. It is not your belief that you seem more successful. should be seeing the problem immediately.
Well,
right
that would
here.
mean you don't understand how Craig thinks, because
Yeah, I can't negate it at that point. I
would
can't
say,
do it.
I have the probability that I might be considered successful, but then I'll look at the evidence and I may update my prior.
No. That's the thing. There isn't even evidence at this point. Evidence isn't a point. When you shift the scope to the area that I believe, in my interpretation or anything, that I can't properly negate you anymore because you qualified it. That's how logic works. You've shifted the scope. And because you've done that, like, I can't even call upon evidence. I can't do jack fucking shit to it. I don't know if any of you guys understand modal logic.
Well, I still think it's not up to you whether or not Craig is successful.
No, that's the whole point. Because the thing is,
I disagree with that. I disagree that a person's success is dependent on what anybody else thinks.
No, that's what I'm trying to show through shifting a scope. If he applied that simple shift of scope, I couldn't do jack shit to it. I couldn't do anything from an external area.
I understood you to say,
I'm sorry,
that Craig could not determine whether he was successful.
No.
That others could.
No. The whole point of that was.
Tell me where I messed up there.
Okay. If Craig said the proposition, I believe I am successful, okay? And then, just like before, I try to negate said proposition with, I do not believe Craig is successful. The thing is, I am not negating Craig successful. I'm negating Craig believes he is successful. And the thing is, belief, used as a qualifier, shifts the scope to an a priori that's mind, or any way that isn't supported by evidence. It is rational, to an area that, as an observer, because I'm interacting with an observed Craig, I cannot negate via the lack of evidence. It is a rational proof. I can't
do it. All right. So help me understand.
Yes.
How the inability to negate determines whether or not another person is successful.
Okay. It determines it in this case because I'm saying that as Craig believes, or X, it doesn't matter, Craig, it could be any person believes that they are successful. As they believe they're successful, there is no way me as an outside observer can disprove their belief of being successful logically. That's how the shifted scope works. Because I'm an outside observer.
That part I understand.
Okay. Because I am an outside observer, which means I have to use inductive reasoning. I have to observe premises and build a general conclusion. I have to use evidence to my proof. Whereas they've arrived at their belief or whatever, it could be entirely rigorous. The thing is, I cannot disprove a rigorous proof. God damn, I'm getting too abstract again with evidence.
No. I'm not fully understanding your answer. What I'm asking is, how does one's inability to negate Craig's assertion, assuming that Craig asserts that he's successful, how does one's inability to disprove that affect Craig at all?
It shows that in any terms that I use evidence to prove successful, I have to be sufficient. Whereas Craig can necessitate successful by shifting of scope. He can have a necessary successfulness. That means he can say, Craig, for all situations, for all models, must be, big caps, successful. And all I can do is cite evidence with correlations or causal chains to say Craig is not successful. Go ahead.
This is because my name is being bandied around a lot. Craig actually believes that question makes no sense to Craig whatsoever, so he doesn't spend any time dwelling on it.
I'm sorry, Craig.
This is a question your assumptions. I mean,
Okay.
Yeah, you can't prove that someone themselves is a failure unless you agree upon the standards you're measuring what is success or failure. Just thinking about this, I mean, would you consider a Confederate soldier at Gettysburg a success?
I mean, the thing is, I would consider a Confederate soldier, more specifically, I would consider generals at Gettysburg a failure, mainly for their inability to understand take the hill practical given by their orders or what it meant. But the thing is, as I understand something, that's a qualifier. As I understand something, as I believe something or anything, is a shifted scope again. It doesn't factually deal with anything.
Conversely, I would argue that the Confederacy was actually a great success at Gettysburg, judging by the ultimate outcome of the battle, which, right, gave the victory to the Union, which I
One
consider
question
a
is,
good thing. So I consider them successful in that sense.
Right, but this is the relative argument that you can't.
Isn't it though? Yeah.
In the Confederate foot soldier,
You're
the
going
First
on. You're
Virginians
going
might
on
have thought he was
relativity.
successful because he died for honor.
But
I mean,
that
how
would be
could
true of an Allied GI on Normandy equally well.
the German soldier at Normandy might have thought his life was a success?
No,
'Cause he
even
died
an
for the
Allied,
fatherland.
yeah, right. They're defending the fatherland. So again, I think this whole question of success actually is
Well, what I'm trying to prove is
kind of a pointless exercise.
well,
in
success
way.
doesn't matter in this. It could be anything. It could be X.
Let
The
me
whole thing that I'm trying to prove is when you try to disprove something via evidence versus something that has been rigorously proven. What happens? That's the whole thing I'm trying to show via shifting scope. Do you see? Or if someone uses a priori assumptions to prove something rigorously to themselves, internal motivation, and I come along with observations to show for categorizations that this is not the case, I in no way can affect this thing because I'm attacking it from a different scope.
I think Bruno's getting ready to off himself.
I'm sorry, Bruno.
No, I'm Frank. I get your point. Yeah, it does come down to it does come down again. Question your assumptions. What is your starting basis of it? You can only agree upon success or failure if you both share the same starting basis.
And the whole point of this matters to success is by putting on the necessity of internal motivation and
Here's the
suspicion
thing,
of
though,
external.
Frank, is
I'm
that
sorry, Bruno. I'm so sorry.
Frank,
okay.
you can only rigorously, logically prove something in the context of a formal system, and the real world is not a formal system. So you got to be careful about
The
what
factual world is not a formal system. The reality of a person can be contextualized in a formal system.
you can make models that are
Yes.
made by formal systems, but we know that models are only approximations of reality and not reality itself. So you got to be a little careful.
It depends who you ask. If you ask of a material
Well, I'm
background,
asking
yes.
you.
If you ask of someone who is a
That's who I got to
property
ask.
dualist, then no, you're wrong. Like Nagel, of which I share stance.
All right, Bruno, why don't you come back?
Go on. Go
Well,
ahead.
we've been doing this for a
Sorry.
while now, so I think it's almost time to finish.
Yeah.
I would,
I gotta get dinner.
yeah. Well, let's see.
Success. I need success for a burrito.
Let me just ask a quick and this question is pretty straightforward. It's like a moral question, but it's been I've been reading on the news that it's really hard to get a PlayStation 5 because all the scalpers basically scoop them up, and people can't get their hands on a PlayStation 5. But so that is, at first it seems that might be morally wrong. But then the interesting thing is that the scalpers themselves are coming out and saying, no, we're doing this because of COVID, because a lot of our people, we can't feed our families. We can't buy our children Christmas gifts. So they're trying to justify this morally, saying, hey, we're actually not doing a bad thing. It's better for us to basically make everybody else pay a bunch of money for a PlayStation 5 than for us not to be able to pay our bills and get our kids Christmas gifts and all that. So it's just a fun question so we can finish up
In any way, can we prove for all scalpers that they are doing this for a reason that is justified via evidence? The answer is no, by the way. So
they're not justified?
No.
What is a scalper? Is it they try to buy it quick and sell it for more? Is that the idea?
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
so
basically. Go ahead. Sorry, Bruno.
No, you can go ahead and explain.
You mean
Anybody?
gouger?
Yes.
So
In this case,
the PlayStation 5 is being sold by Sony, right, Michael? So Sony is trying to sell the PlayStation 5 to you, to me, to the direct consumer, and they're charging $500. But then let's say Sashir wants to make a quick buck, and he's not afraid of some risk, so he buys the PlayStation 5. Well, actually, he doesn't buy one PlayStation 5. He goes out and he buys 50, right? He buys 50 PlayStation 5s, and he sells them each. And there's a lot of demand, so he's gonna make some money. He sells each for $700 instead of $500. So
because the company can only produce so much, so
Exactly.
he's getting in on it first.
So right now there are no PlayStation 5s available because honestly, people can't buy them.
damn it, Craig.
It's very hard.
Well, it's supply and demand.
Right.
Yeah.
You
Yes.
corner the market on the supply. You can.
No, I get it.
The scalpers like
You
Sashir
get it.
here, not in real life, but in the example, they're selling. So basically, you,
I've
Michael,
got a lot of PlayStations.
you might have to pay $700.
Well, I'm willing to deal.
So
But does the
okay.
fact that something's economically savvy make it moral?
Well, that's the question, right?
No, it doesn't. I mean, we can show plenty of historical instances of things that were economically savvy that I feel like many of us here would look, dear God, we just talked about slavery, that we would say were, immoral. So no, these two do not correlate.
Yeah, I agree. But they're also saying, hey, we're doing this because we need to make money to feed our families.
And once again, I just said for all instances of people gouging, here's the thing. I would have to prove via evidence for all instances people gouging that they are doing this for families or justified instance. And because I can only prove this via evidence, a for all instance would be fallacious. It would be a sweeping statement. It can't be done soundly.
Well,
So what about for a specific person that does it for that reason?
I could do that. I could do it for a specific person.
So let's say there is a specific person that does it for that reason.
Hypothetically,
But why does the scalper even have to justify it? I mean, what if they just say, "I just want to make more money"?
that's the thing. They could do that, and I would say you're an asshole. But
yeah, if they just go out and say, I want to make some money out of, I mean, that's pretty.
I've been dealing with this
morally
workout equipment,
reprehensible.
by the way, not the PS5. But
Is
There's
anybody
another argument.
familiar with is anybody familiar with the term rent seeking?
with what?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
what?
Rent seeking?
I haven't heard it.
No.
Mm-mm.
Okay.
What does it mean?
All right. Sorry for the
No,
interruption.
please.
Oh, but the people could also justify it. This is what a lot of people that like work with hedge funds and options and all that stuff, that they could justify it by saying that they are allocating the PS5s to the people who really want it the most. So
Yeah.
basically, when the PS5s are only $500, they're just going out to, and there's only a finite number. Well, maybe there's some people that were willing to pay up to $1,000, but they didn't get it because they weren't in on it first. So by charging a super high price, you're really figuring out who really, really wants it.
That's a good point, but that's also not a good point because, and I know
I don't agree with it.
I know you don't.
Yeah.
I'm guessing you don't, but that's definitely a bad argument because, look, that only makes sense if everybody.
You said it, Craig. You said it.
If everybody has the same amount of money to spend, of disposable income in the first place. There are some people that are just not going to be able to afford a $700 toy, which is
Right, but this if we're talking morality, you essentially have to place that what is the greater good of owning a PS4? I mean, you could argue like Martin Shkreli, the famous like farmer bro guy, who basically bought out a lupus drug and just jacked up the price by 1,000%. you could argue there's a he's acting immorality because that's a drug that's required
Yep.
for this good to allow people to live with lupus. That said, can you live without a PS4 besides what your
PS5.
13-year-old cousin might say?
I would.
I mean, if
I would. Go ahead.
The difference between driving from my house to Atlanta in a Yugo
Mhm.
differs insignificantly from driving to my house to Atlanta in a Maserati as compared to not having a car at all.
Okay.
You understand what I'm saying?
Not entirely. No.
Okay. Well,
How does it feel, David?
let's I don't have a Maserati.
I think we just missed the connection.
I don't have a Yugo either. But
Gotta set the stage, David.
here's the other end of the perspective, other end of the spectrum. I have been told don't buy clothes from Walmart because those are made in sweatshops in Pakistan or El Salvador or somewhere. And the funny thing is that if you are you have a job sewing clothes and you're paid what is in our culture would be considered a pittance for your labor. If I don't buy those clothes, do you lose your job? I mean, in other words, the argument that you can not buy something because it supports a system that you don't agree with only goes so far, because that system employs people who otherwise wouldn't be employed. Does that make sense?
David, this is an argument I brought up regarding
Yeah,
legalization.
it does make sense. It does make sense, and it's a complicated argument. I mean, but I think that's a different discussion. Like I
I mean,
sure how
Okay,
that
all
applies
right. So I missed the point entirely, but that's how I interpreted what you were saying.
No, I see what you're saying. You're talking about the epistemic or knowledge-based areas of what we can say of on any value judgment that we're placing on it. And then with
into that argument, I just want to say. Yeah.
and then Shashir, or I think it was Shashir, what he was talking about where we justify something, or I want to make clear, morally, as someone does something, at least to me as I define it, is not the same as justification for something. I can say, and this came about when we were talking about is something better than, worse than, more free, less free, or something like that. Transitivity brings this about a lot, or consistency in a system where we value anything more than another, or less than another. The thing is, I think someone can do something and can be justified or justify themselves in doing something, but morally can be an entire asshole, can be a huge prick. An example of this would be like, we've had many political figures who, via the court and via the consistency of the legal system that were placed upon them, they were justified within those terms. But morally, I still look and I go, yeah, but they're an asshole. I don't like that person. Or that just doesn't see something like, yeah, but legally they were justified via the citation of evidence and its enforcement. Similarly with economics, supply and demand, someone can just say, I'm just supplying the demand. I'm noticing, which Michael was talking about, I'm just noticing a demand and making it available for people who have more at their disposal, who want it more, to adjust. I'm adjusting to that, playing into that area. And I go, yeah, I think you're very savvy. You're such an economical, and conjunctions are amazing things. You're an asshole. So, I mean, you can be both. It doesn't go against them. Neither negates the other.
But, and also, as far as the argument that you said, David, about if you don't buy from Walmart, then Walmart might have to lay off some of their workers, right? Now, the thing is, In the short run, yes, that would happen. Walmart would get less business, so they'd have to lay off some of their employees.
Just so,
However,
just so it's clear, Walmart buys clothes from vendors that exploit people.
Mm-hmm.
yeah, yes.
Yeah.
So in the short run, it would be the case that they would lose their job. However, if lots of people thought like you, then in the long run, that would force, first of all, there's still the same demand for clothes. So
Okay.
other business,
I'm not saying that I think that way. I'm saying I consider that.
yeah. Yeah, no, I'm not. I'm just
That's
talking
different.
I'm just a philosopher. Yeah, I don't
Yeah.
accuse. Yeah,
I think you make a good
I
point.
do not think people should be paid 50 cents a day to sew clothes.
yeah,
But at the same time, if 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 I'm told not to buy those clothes because the people are only paid 50 cents a day, am I going to take 50 cents a day away from a person who has nothing else?
in the short run, you would. So in the short run, you'd be taking away that 50 cents. In the long run, that would cause pressure for other companies to pay their employees more, basically. So in the short run, yes, maybe not in the long run is my answer.
And one thing I feel like we're kind of scathing over that I thought you were getting at initially, David, but is the simple, ought implies can, and the fact that I say you ought to buy from Walmart or you ought to buy from Target or you ought to buy from this place, it implies that you can buy from this place, that you have the ability to buy from this place. That's kind of what I thought you got at when you said, I'd rather not have a car. That is to say, when you're making these judgments about, Walmart's better, Target's better, whatever place you go to.
Let me just
Go ahead.
ask, what judgment are you saying that I made?
Okay, when you said the judgment that you ought not to buy from Walmart, vis-a-vis.
Okay, you completely misunderstood me. I did not make that judgment. That was suggested to me as a reason why I should not buy clothes from Walmart.
Oh yeah. This is initially.
I tendered no opinion.
Yeah, this is initially what I thought.
And yet you assigned that opinion to me.
No, this was initially what I thought you were getting at, and then I realized you weren't. And I addressed it later when I said, oh, it's an epistemic problem or a problem of knowledge of the consequences. This is just kind of what I got at, and I just want to throw this out there too, because I feel like this does have to do with the initial problem of the economics of supply and demand when people take advantage of economics. That ought implies can is a problem, I guess.
Well, I think
if I can jump in here, this is definitely a topic for another, and it's a topic of regarding globalization, and this is one I've had a lot of debates with people on, but I'll just basically give my quick 2 cents about it. Is that yes, there are people being exploited by it. There are. That said, without the one thing that, again, if you're talking about a developing country or third world, is that they can use is their labor. Is their labor cost is substantially less. That said, why would there be any reason to move capital to a developing country from a developed country unless there was a gain to them? In other words, getting cheaper labor. And frankly, I'll tell you, one of the things that kind of changed my view of free trade was going to Indonesia. And yes, there's a lot of exploitation there. But then back to our original argument, we're talking about people who used to be farmers, was that it wasn't a good life being a rice farmer in Indonesia. The fact that people are willing to work in sweatshops rather than being a rice farmer had to say something. Now, if you look at a place like Singapore, Singapore is one of the most advanced countries in the world and it has one of the highest per capita. In 1965, it wasn't that. They only got there because they exploited the low cost. They had sweatshops. They had some of the worst things that we in the West like to complain about, yet that was the necessary stepping stone to get to being the Singapore that we see now.
Well, I think you made a very good point, Michael. I think that I mean, obviously we're not talking about scalpers here, but that's another interesting question. The question of, like David, said, if we can justify it that way. But I think you're right, Michael. I think that we can't really justify it that way, because that's only like looking at the short term, and in the long term people would still need those things, but they would just have to pay workers more, like a decent wage, in order to produce them. It's not like people would actually for some reason stop buying those things, that industry would go away, right? I mean, I think it's hard to get past that argument, and I think it's a very strong counter argument. I can't really see how you could counter that counter argument.
But yeah, but to be fair to David, there is that short run consequence, and short run consequences don't mean nothing, right? If someone's was getting paid 50 cents, now you're taking that away, it still means something.
Yeah, I
So,
mean,
yeah, this is actually a very frequent.
Let me put it this way. I don't think people should be exploited, and I don't think people should just make 50 cents a day for sewing clothes. I think.
Yeah, no, I know you don't. I never thought that you did. I never made. Yeah.
The question in my mind is, what is the path from where the world is now to where it should be? Is that path best served by not purchasing things from Walmart? Or is that path better served by purchasing things from Walmart? That's I don't know the answer to that.
Right, but this gets
That's
back
the
to the
whole
original
thing.
question of freedom and economic freedom, is we can actually vote with our dollars. There is such a thing as what's called fair trade, which is largely driven by economic decisions of consumers in developed countries. We're saying, okay, well, I'm not going to buy my coffee from a place that grows from plantations. I'm going to buy my coffee from a place that, actually pays farmers and gets directly from farmers to do it. And if the farmers grow in a sustainable way, I'm willing to buy my rainforest blend coffee.
But that's the thing. I would say for every instance we have where people make these informed choices, because I know what you're advocating for here was representation through free market. You said it, is basically, I would say for every instance we have a proper representation of people through a knowledge-based and qualitative, expression. We have frivolous buying. We have things we've all probably been doing on Amazon, where it's buying stuff that isn't proper representation of us. It's just kind of impulse that we have nothing better to do. I would say, and that's not how I want to be represented. I wouldn't call myself a well-informed buyer at that point as I am to be represented. Like as analogous to a well-informed voter in a democratic system. To give some representation. I don't know. I'm sorry to cut you off, Shashir.
No, that's fine. But I get what you're saying, because there is a knowledge base and understanding of consequences of actions.
Yeah.
I would still say, though, if we didn't, and it's not even just globalization, frankly, we wouldn't have the prosperity of us in America unless we actually had our own sweatshop phase. I mean, if anybody's read The Jungle or known about U.S. history,
yeah,
we had sweatshops. That was a thing.
We do.
I think that there's another aspect to this as well, and it's just the fact that the world is changing very rapidly. I mean, this question can't really be, it's not static, right? Our means of production are definitely changing, and they're changing very fast. Like in 30 years from now, robots are probably going to be producing these things. So, this has an expiration date. This question, but it is a question that doesn't have an expiration date in terms of how can the means of production change and the people be better off, right? How can we create a system, because the system is going to change regardless, but how can we make the system change in a way that favors people and creates more equality, or at least creates more prosperity? At the end of the day, that's what we want, more prosperity, rather than creating less prosperity. So which is a real problem if income inequality is such that you have a very small amount of people that have all the wealth, and the vast majority of people that are become increasingly poorer and have, just to tie it up with our previous conversation, less economic freedom.
But I've actually addressed this argument with other people, and I've heard people present the argument, well, those people that have the wealth, and this ties into our talk successful and freedom earlier than that. I've heard people take the stance, well, those people were just more passionate than you. They were just more passionate. They wanted to get something, or they wanted it more, or something like that is what they would say. And the thing is, I look at them and I would go, because I don't think every person that is rich does not deserve it. I couldn't prove that. That's logically ill-formed. That's saying all people that are rich do not deserve it. I can't prove that. But the thing is, I look at that person and I'd say, how do you prove that every person that is rich does deserve it? Is the way I would counter back. And once again, they can't do that either.
And we don't even need to personalize things, because it's really not about that. I mean, income inequality is really more like a mathematical equation. And you look at the income inequality in the world, and it's an exponential growth right now. And I would argue that that has a lot more to do with the system itself than with Joe or Jack or Matt. I mean, it doesn't really matter. It's like the system is just producing more and more income inequality. And I think, this is not, it's not about a person or two people, or, it's not like, this is not personal, this is really just about the system and how. So can capitalism in this way work forever? So that's the question, right? With automation.
Capitalism is an outdated terminology, so is socialism. The proper terminology used on economics is command economy, mixed economy, market economy, and traditional economy.
Okay.
Neither of those categories apply to anything.
Sure. The market economy that we have now, the market economy that
mixed
we have
economy. We have a mixed economy.
A mixed economy. Mixed in what sense?
We have a mixed economy in that we have variations of a command economy and agricultural economy, as we do still have farmer bases, and we have regulations that go on to our market economy.
Okay, let's say this mixed economy that the world.
So does pretty much everyone else have a mixed economy?
Well, yes. So the question is, does this economy, is it sustainable in the long term? That's the big question. That's the big question. That's the sweatshops question. It's a tiny question that is integrated into that one. So I don't know, but I would agree with David in the sense that I have no idea. I have no idea. Ultimately, like, I don't know how you fix things, and but it's.
Go ahead, David.
I'm gonna go out on a limb here.
Yeah.
I think in an ideal world, everyone would have access to health care and education and welfare or universal basic income, or something. I think in an ideal world, that is an aspiration. And my question is how do we get from where we are to that? And how much the United States can afford to do anything it wants, but it can't afford to do everything it wants. And so the debate that goes on in my head is, how much can we afford now? Can we buy it all now? If we do we undercut the economy we need to sustain it? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I think the United States can afford definitely to do more. We are the most profitable country on paper in the world, undoubtedly. We can afford to do more. That being said, yeah, but what you're talking about, I I know you got angry. I brought up Ott and Ken before.
I didn't get angry.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Did you
didn't
perceive me as angry? I'm sorry. I
maybe
was
a little
not
bit. I just false equivalence inside of false equivalence. I'm furious right now. But
passionate.
I'm passionate right now. So the thing is, I would say Ken, and this is where the on Ken comes about. Can the United States more? Yes. So ought it do more? Well, that comes down to the ground. We were talking about liberal societies versus authoritarian in our last conversation a little bit about the elect. And I would say, as far as we are to be a liberal society, I look at all of you and I would go, do you think it ought to do more? Because you are the people. You had the voice in that. The authoritarian, that you can't do shit about that. But the liberal one, what do you think? Do you think we ought to do more? I guess would only be the way I can throw it back. I think in some cases we ought to do more. So far as we can do so well informed, as you kind of got at with the consequence, or we can do it where we know all the variables and different changings and actually have a helpful impact on other places in the world. You know, because the U.S. does have a habit of trying to help places and making things worse because they didn't know about the shit that was going on at the time. Go ahead, Greg.
So what I think it's not a zero-sum game. So I think we can still continue to do well, and I think everybody else can do better than they're doing now too. That is that other places don't necessarily have to improve at the expense of the United States, for example. But I think as long as we continue to think of this as a zero-sum game, where if means that if I win, somebody else has to lose, then it's not going to happen. I think it's a fundamental, I hate this word, paradigm shift that needs to take place in how we think about things.
What do you got against Kuhn?
Quite a bit, actually. But,
Oh.
But I particularly hate that phrase because I heard it a lot in the
precisely
70s.
what I'm talking
and it
about,
was like
Craig.
everywhere. Yeah.
That's exactly what I'm talking about, Craig. The real challenge is how do we get from where we are to where we think we should be?
We need to decide to do it. And that's the thing. Is there enough collective will to decide to do it? Was there enough collective will to decide to beat the Russians to the moon in the 1960s? Yes, there was. Is there enough collective will to deal with global warming? Good question. I don't think we know yet the answer to that. And I don't think we know, even if that will came into being, whether it would wind up working or not. But there are all these, but we need to decide that we're going to do it, and then we need to follow through, right? We don't want to promise, hey, we're going to have humans on the moon by 2024, because we know that's a bunch of horseshit, right? Every administration has been promising returning to the moon for 45 years. So there has to be the will to follow through on a commitment. And it's a long-term commitment, and it's a commitment that by its nature being a long-term commitment, you're never going to satisfy in a country that only cares about quarterly reports.
I understand. And where that will does not exist or is insufficient, how do we encourage it?
I can jump in here, Craig. I my own personal pet peeve is I always hate people bringing up the moonshot as saying, if we can get to the moon, we can do this. Getting to the moon, yes, was a technical achievement. It was a complex technical achievement. That said, as far as a society, it wasn't that big of an achievement. In terms of something like global warming, it's a matter of just developing new technology. It's a matter of massive changes on an individual scale. And for most Americans, getting to the moon did not require any personal sacrifice. Whereas some of these major changes we're talking about requires you to change something different in your life, which we know most Americans aren't good.
True that. Honestly, I don't know that I actually think most of these problems are in fact soluble, and I suspect they're going to wind up solving themselves the hard way. And that concerns me more, again, for the younger people in the audience than for someone like myself, who will probably not be around to necessarily see these results. But
well, this is one of those that might be good for another discussion. As I said, I've been watching a lot of documentaries.
Yeah, it's getting kind of late.
Yeah, about the fall of civilization. And there's a lot of parallels between the fall of many civilizations and kind of what we're seeing now.
Mm-hmm. And it's not like falls of civilizations are not inevitable, because, hey, they are. You're not gonna last forever. Nothing ever has, and it's unlikely that they ever will. So.
No, certainly. And a lot of the tipping points happen when people don't realize it. I mean, ancient Sumer didn't realize that their civilization was already pretty much doomed at the height of the city of Uruk.
Right.
And chances are we might not realize that we're doomed yet. Just say we're doomed.
Because it's basically impossible to foresee the future. So you can just say statistically, yes, it will happen, but as to when or how or why, that part's mysterious.
Bruno, are you trying to say something, Bruno? We can't hear you.
I think you're muted.
We still can't hear you.
I think he's trying to say, get the hell off of my podcast now, guys.
Now we can. Yeah.
Oh, I don't know what happened. So that's why everybody was ignoring me for a while.
Yeah, I was gonna say you looked so sad, and I was wondering if your mic was off. But yeah, I couldn't tell if you're speaking or not. So yeah.
I don't know. I get it. The mic actually has a volume thing, and I didn't know that.
Oh.
I was playing around with it, so now I learned. Oh, that was stupid. Anyways.
Sorry about that.
Oh,
You never said hello to Carolyn. Hello, Carolyn.
Oh, Carolyn.
Hello.
Oh, Carolyn.
Hey, Carolyn.
She was hiding.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was saying maybe this is because we're on such an upbeat note, a happy note, that maybe we should end the podcast.
We're on a happy note.
Yeah, like the world is gonna end. This is the fall of civilization. All our young people should mourn,
Well, all things come to an end.
All men must die. This is kind of like a Planet of the Apes sort of ending.
No, I just.
How do we have a good ending? That'll be our next discussion. How do we maximize our final days?
Schopenhauer.
We should all go out in some sort of a collective orgy, maybe a world.
Well, I don't know. I think from what I have observed of COVID, I'm pretty sure the world's. This is off of what I know, and once again, this is going to have the futurism problems. I'm pretty sure the world's going to go out with a whimper. I feel like it's going to be just.
Yeah, we're gonna die of stupid.
No, not just stupid. Just kind of like a combination of people just in abject disbelief, not necessarily skepticism, just disbelief, and just they're not going to freak out. Right? There may be some rioting, but I think it's just going to be people sitting at home just trying to contemplate or being very much, lost in the infinite. They won't be able to fully grasp the end, their mortality.
Just people watching Netflix and eating ice cream and
basically.
watching it on TV. Okay, let's wrap it up. Let's wrap it up with this apocalyptic message. Thanks a lot, guys. Thanks for
I was just going to say, under the laws of thermodynamics, yes, it will end in a whimper.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But I really appreciate everybody coming.
Yeah,
So thank
T.S.
you.
Eliot and thermodynamics agree.
Yeah. Anyway, good
And
seeing you
then we'll find
guys.
out it really is turtles all the way down. That's what I think.
Yeah. I'll see you guys later.
I hope
Yeah.
it is. We can make
Good night.
soup if it's turtles all the way down.
Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot, everybody. Any final remarks?
Mm-mm.
Okay, so yeah, I'll see you guys next week at the latest.
Yeah, hope we don't blow up by next week.
We'll be fine.
I think the fall of civilization will probably take a little longer.
I have no idea, but
You never know.
I have no idea to show its fall or its continuance. So.
I think
There's a
next.
huge asteroid coming in 2068. That's the article I shared.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Yep,
So that's-
Apophis is looking at us, man.
I'll probably be
That is
dead by
not-
then, so it's fine.
I'll still be alive, but you know what? It'll be a hell of a way to go. Anyway, bye, guys.
All right. Good night.
Bye, bye, guys.
Bye.
Thank you so much.